Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion of Alpha Tau and our Alpha DART product. My name is Raphi Levy. I'm the CFO of Alpha Tau, and I'm excited to be here today to share with you a bit about our story. Alpha Tau wants to address one of the most critical unmet needs in oncology, not just destroying tumors, but unlocking the immune system to fight them elsewhere in the body and prevent them from coming back. Firstly, I'm joined by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Robert Den. Dr. Den, thank you for the time. Perhaps you can give us a quick introduction.
Thanks so much, Raphi. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. So my name is Robert Den. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Alpha Tau. I started in the company in 2019. I'm also an associate professor of radiation oncology, cancer biology, and urology at Jefferson here in the US. I trained at Harvard and Mass General and then Jefferson for my radiation oncology residency. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Den. So today we're going to talk about our proprietary Alpha DART platform designed for local tumor destruction, but also showing evidence of triggering a systemic immune response, really aiming to change the trajectory of cancer treatment. I want to talk a bit about the science behind the Alpha DART, how it stimulates an apparent immune system response, and then talk a bit about the real-world clinical insights from physicians like yourself and others who are treating patients, our clinical and regulatory milestones across the world, and how we're preparing for global commercialization. Maybe let's begin by diving into the science that underpins our approach. So, Dr. Den, can you talk a bit about what is the Alpha DART and how does it differ from traditional radiation therapies?
So the Alpha DART is really a very fascinating product. It sits kind of in a space between radiopharmaceuticals and traditional radiation oncology. So what the Alpha DART is, it's a biocompatible, inert, metallic seed that we then coat with a radiopharmaceutical, radium-224. Now, radium-224 is an unstable element, meaning that it needs to release energy in order to become stable and exist. And so by the process of decay, radioactive decay, what occurs is that radium will decay down to radon, and radium is fixated on the seed itself, but its daughter, radon, is actually thrown off of the seed by a process that we call recoil, by which the daughter atom is actually released. So while traditional radiation therapy or brachytherapy works by having the seed itself being the radioactive element, in our case, our seed is really a scaffold by which we can introduce the radiopharmaceutical, in this case, radium-224, directly into the tumor. And we take advantage of several features. One is that there's an intratumoral delivery or intralesional delivery of this type of therapy. But in general, we know that one of the challenges with alpha radiation has always been its limited range in tissue. By utilizing a radiopharmaceutical, we're actually able to overcome this because the daughter atoms actually carry the alpha radiation further and further into the tumor as they move and explode, and actually create a clinically meaningful range by which we can then treat localized disease.
That's great. Thank you very much for the explanation. So then, as we think about not just the local delivery, as you mentioned, but really the ability to generate some of that systemic immune response, how is the Alpha DART, in your view, potentially breaking down those tumors and driving that immune response across the body, even outside of the area that was treated?
Great question, Raphi. So I think it's really a twofold approach. One is that the radiation that we are delivering with the alpha is a much higher dose than can be achieved with standard radiation therapy. Secondly, because we are putting the radiation directly inside the tumor, we're avoiding killing the T cell and B cell repertoire that generally sits in the periphery and around the tumor. Third, we see actually something quite fascinating, which is that the diffusion or the movement of the atoms is actually more reduced in normal tissue than it is in tumor tissues. So what we are able to do is deliver a much more lethal dose to the tumor. We're actually able to create cell destruction, and we're able to preferentially spare the normal tissues all around and the normal immune cells all around the tumor, by which we can then evoke a full immune response.
That's fascinating. Thank you. So then, can you explain to us a little bit, what does it mean when we talk about taking a cold tumor and making it hot? What does that look like, and what are the implications for patients?
So that's a very interesting question, in that cold tumors and hot tumors are really different and really behave in a completely nuanced manner. Meaning, when we look at the tumor histopathologically, when we think about the tumor a priori, we really don't see a difference between a cold and a hot tumor. But it's not until we try to evoke an immune response where we actually see this difference come to the fore. And so when we talk about a cold and a hot tumor, what we're really discussing is how robust an immune response do we see within the tumor itself. A hot tumor is one where we see a very robust immune response. And what that then translates to in the clinical realm is longer survival for patients with any particular disease. Now, we're able to look at different aspects of the tumor, different aspects of the immune biology, which gives us a clue as to what tumors are cold versus those that are hot. However, really what the goal in oncology is to do is to try to convert all of these cold tumors into hot tumors, because what that will then mean is that it will translate into a prolonged survival and improved quality of life for the patient. Now, there have been many, many approaches to actually create a new nidus by which you can translate a cold tumor into a hot tumor. There are many different thoughts around this, whether it's changing the immune microenvironment from one that's repressive to one that's more activated. There are thoughts that it also revolves around production of neoantigens, essentially new foci that are generated from the tumor that are distinct and unique from the normal biology, which will then allow the immune system to recognize it as foreign and then evoke an immune response. And so within Alpha Tau, we're really trying to focus on these different aspects and different avenues, and to see how the Alpha DaRT itself can actually convert this cold tumor from a hot tumor. Excuse me, a cold tumor to a hot tumor.
Got it, thank you. That's really interesting. It's actually very reminiscent of some of the topics I discussed with Professor Popovtzer last week, where we looked at ways that he's seeing the Alpha DaRT used in patients in the clinic, and in particular, the ability to evoke that immune response, as you mentioned. Maybe we'll just take a look at some of the highlights from that discussion. Today, I'm here with Professor Aron Popovtzer, the director of the Sharett Institute of Oncology at Hadassah Medical Center. Professor Popovtzer, thank you for joining us, and I'd love if you would tell us a minute about yourself.
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and good evening. My name is Aron Popovtzer. I am a doctor. I am trained in several specialties. I'm actually an ENT and medical and radiation oncologist. And nowadays, for the last 5 years, I'm the chair of the Cancer Center and Hadassah Medical University Center, which is in Jerusalem. I'm involved in many fields. My big passion is the innovative radiation treatments, and I'm also involved in immunotherapy in many different types of studies. And specifically, I've been involved with the Alpha Tau company from its beginning. I'm proud to say that I'm the first person to implement the technology, and I was the one who took it from the academic, where it was before, to the clinical life. And I'm following it, and I'm seeing all the exciting new treatments that are reaching, and we're seeing how we are changing the medicine through new technologies with new ideas. And what we have learned after years of using this technology, I've been using this since 2017, is that it has advantages over regular radiation in the fact that it causes less side effect, since it does not affect, and this is one of the unique characteristics, it does not affect the environment but only the tumor itself. It could be effective in places where regular radiation is not affected, due to the fact that its biology, its radiobiology, is different. It is as what we call a higher let, meaning that it's more effective for a certain area than regular radiation for the same amount of radiation dose. And therefore, we are able to treat tumors that potentially we have failed in regular radiation, and at the same times we cause less toxicity. This is something that we've learned through the years, and we've been using this for skin cancer, for head and neck cancer, and lately also for pancreas cancer. And this is the first unique characteristics of this type of treatment, is the fact that it is more effective biologically, And due to the fact that it's only effective for a very short distance, it does not cause toxicity in the surrounding environment. This is specifically interesting for patients who failed with regular radiation. And in general, our feeling is that if you fail once in radiation, it doesn't make sense to radiate again, because there's no reason that one treatment that failed once will succeed the second time. And here what we do is we treat many patients who failed with regular radiation with alpha DaRT radiation, and we are successful in places in which we failed in the past. And this is important first for curable, obviously, reasons. And the second of all is it is much more better as far as cosmetic results than during extensive surgery or extensive radiation after local failure. The patient's overall survival really have been extended. In patients who have been living in the past a median survival of 12 months, now we see them living up to 20 months, which is a really significant change. Now I'd like to move forward and talk about our new study in head and neck cancer in metastatic patients. In general, the treatment for metastatic head and neck cancer is immunotherapy. The problem is that only 20% of the patients are affected by an immunotherapy, and even the better players, those who have a high biomarker for the effectiveness of immunotherapy, only 22% of these patients respond to the treatment. Now, for example, let's take this 96-year-old patient who had a very extensive local disease involving the inner lip, the area that we call buccal mucosa, extending into the skin. She had what we call dermal metastasis, which is a terrible disease in which you have so much extensive disease that it spreads into the superficial skin. And as you can see here in the CT, she has an involved lymph node. This patient actually was offered a very extensive surgery in which we would have taken out half her mandibula, her skin, do a huge neck dissection. This is a 5-hour surgery for a 96-year-old patient. At the end of the day, what we did is we treated a very small area within one of the lymph nodes with alpha DaRTs, and we added this to regular Keytruda, which was not that promising. And this patient is now over 3 years after the beginning of the treatment, and she has no evidence of disease. The impact on the treatment was so strong that after a year, we basically stopped treatment. And now this 97-year-old patient, who has an excellent quality of life, is just followed without any treatment. In this case, what we think is happening is due to the fact that the alpha is very, very effective, and as we mentioned earlier, has a very strong radiobiological effectiveness. What we think it does is it really triggers, by killing tumor cells and spreading them out around them, it triggers the immune system, activates the T cells, and therefore the immunotherapy becomes more active in a much more broader spectrum. And it's more interesting in the way that there really is no competition for this treatment, because there is no other treatment up to this point which has shown to help the immunotherapy become more effective.
So as you can see, I had a great conversation with Professor Popovtzer. I just shared a couple of the highlights now. If you want to see the full conversation, look through our social media and you'll find it there. So Dr. Den, why don't we continue what we were discussing earlier? So can you give us just a bit of a background as to the different cancer types that Alpha Tau is exploring, and where do our clinical trials stand right now across the world?
Thanks, Raphi. So I'll start here in the United States. We currently have an ongoing pivotal trial that is equivalent to a phase 3 trial in the drug space for medical devices. And so this is prior to submission for FDA marketing approval. It will be for patients with squamous cell carcinoma of the skin. We have enrollment across multiple sites throughout the entire United States. We've recently also received approval from the FDA for a trial for patients who are immunocompromised, who developed squamous cell carcinoma of the skin. And so that trial will be open in several sites throughout the US. In addition, we have 2 trials that have recently been activated, one for patients with both locally advanced as well as metastatic pancreatic cancer, who will be receiving Alpha DaRT in the frontline setting in combination with FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy. And finally, we have approval for a trial for patients with recurrent glioblastoma, which is a brain tumor, a very aggressive brain tumor, which we'll be conducting at some select sites here within the US. Looking more globally, we have trials undergoing in Canada for both pancreatic cancer as well as for metastatic colorectal cancer. In Japan, we've completed and are under review by the PMDA for patients with head and neck cancer. And in Europe, we have multiple trials open for vulvar cancer, pancreatic cancer, skin cancer. And in Israel, we have trials open in lung cancer, in prostate cancer, breast cancer, as well as the other malignancies that I've discussed so far. So as you can see, we have a very robust and diverse portfolio. We're focusing across multiple different geographical areas and in multiple different cancer spaces. And one thing I'll note, Raphi, and just to ad-lib a little, is that one of the interesting things about the Alpha DaRT is that because it is a physical therapy, because we are using radiation, what we've found is we've not found a distinction or a difference in response between different populations, regardless of the geography that they come from.
Very interesting, thanks. So then, if I understand correctly, in the US, we're looking at 4 different trials underway. Is that right? What does that mean in terms of the focus of the company in the US versus elsewhere?
Yes, that's true. We have 4 different trials that are currently ongoing in the US. 3 of them are pilot trials, so smaller trials. 1 of them is a pivotal trial. What I think it shows is that we understand that this is a platform technology that has applications across multiple different malignancies. What these trials are allowing us to do is to develop some initial safety data to then move towards larger pivotal trials. And just in general, as a philosophy as a company, what we have elected to do is really to start with trials outside of the United States to build some initial feasibility as well as safety data, really perfect the product, and then bring it into the US market where we can develop a more robust safety profile and then go towards full efficacy studies in the pivotal setting. What it also means is it gives us multiple shots on goal, which means that we have multiple opportunities for success across multiple different malignancies. I'll also note that not only are we running trials with DaRT as a monotherapy, but as Dr. Popovtzer spoke, we also have trials in combination with different immunotherapies. So we're really bringing DaRT into the forefront across the multiple different landscapes within oncology in general.
Fascinating. So as you look at that US pivotal study in the recurrent skin cancer, is there a potential to use that perhaps in other countries, use that some of that data? Can it have relevance for Europe or elsewhere once that data is available?
Excellent question, Raphi. Yes, so we plan on cross-filing into Europe for CE marking. We have had initial discussions with BSI, which is one of the regulatory bodies within Europe for CE marking. And so the idea is that by conducting the trial here in the US with the level of rigor that is required by the FDA, that will then allow us to have the necessary data and the necessary regulatory package by which we can then utilize this in other markets as well.
Fascinating. Okay. Very interesting stuff. Thank you, Dr. Den. So it sounds like there is a very busy pipeline, very active and really expanding into a number of different interesting cancers. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I'll say briefly on my side, as we think about what that means for the business, right? Alpha Tau is really getting ready to support that launch. And that means a bunch of different things, right? We are continuing to build out our manufacturing capabilities, whereas we currently manufacture out of smaller facilities for clinical trials based in Massachusetts as well as in Jerusalem. We are currently building our first commercial scale facility in New Hampshire, which we hope to finish construction of relatively soon, and then spend the rest of the year on validating it and getting it up and running for production. We are also very actively preparing on the pre-commercial front as we analyze potential pricing for the product, conversations with payers like insurers and market access, making sure that we have the appropriate commercial groundwork so that if and when we do get the FDA approval, we're able to market that product successfully. And so we are really focused now on making sure that in some of our core geographies, like the US, like in Europe, et cetera, that we're able to move as soon as we get that approval. We have spent some time, I know Dr. Den, you and I have discussed this as well, but we spent quite a bit of time thinking about how do we really want to prioritize these different cancer types, right? Because on the one hand, we're most advanced in the skin cancer setting or in the head and neck cancer, like in Japan, as you mentioned. On the other hand, it's clear that there's an even bigger unmet need in some of those cancers you mentioned earlier, like the brain cancers, the pancreatic cancers, et cetera. And so that has been an interesting source of discussion internally as to whether we want to really launch as soon as we get that initial approval, hopefully in the skin cancer, or perhaps wait a little bit longer and launch in an indication with just an obvious unmet need and an overwhelming clinical demand as we see clinicians coming and looking for us to provide new solutions for these patients. Maybe I'll say just lastly, obviously, there's been a lot of focus in the industry on this particular space on radiotherapy, and that's been a great source of strategic discussion for us as some of the larger players out there in the space are always looking for new assets and new partnerships. And so we're continuing to explore either ways to co-develop with them or ally with them on certain products or certain geographies, et cetera. And so that's really been an interesting area as we really think about the commercial implications for this product to see a lot of that inbound interest and have those discussions with some of these strategic companies. So again, it's an incredibly exciting company right now to be part of, both in terms of the clinical development, what it means for patients and what it means for our progress on the regulatory side, but also as we think about the commercial opportunity and the strategic opportunities from other companies out there looking to work with an unbelievable asset like this. So I think that's going to wrap up our general intro discussion here. I thank you for your time. I think we do have time for some Q&A, and I see some questions coming in. So maybe I'll go through those and start tackling them and also ask you, Dr. Den, as necessary here. One question I see coming in here was, what should we look at in terms of value-driving catalysts in the next 6 to 12 months? So on my side, I would say the ones that I'm most focused on are going to be, number one, the completion of the recruitment for our pivotal study that Dr. Den mentioned earlier in the skin cancer setting in the US. And we're targeting that one around the end of Q3. So we've got just a couple months left there. Once that's done, we know that we will then be in a position to just sit and wait for the trial data. Hopefully we get that first half of next year and have a view as to the success of the trial and the ability to submit for FDA approval. I'd also highlight the response from the PMDA. Dr. Den mentioned earlier that we have submitted a request for marketing approval in Japan for recurrent head and neck cancer. And we are also hoping to hear about that sometime in this quarter or next. And that'll be an exciting milestone as well to get a regulatory approval in Japan. And as Dr. Den mentioned, we are also initiating a number of trials in the States. So we are looking for patients to come in the US now in the pancreatic cancer trial, in the brain cancer GBM trial. Again, a number of exciting things that will be going on over the course of the rest of the year. So stay tuned for really a number of really important milestones. Just given how many shots we have on goal here, there is a steady flow of news coming and some really important milestones coming up. I see a question here around tumor types that we can treat. So Dr. Den, I'll give my view. I welcome if you feel differently, right? I think my approach has always been to assume that we think that the product is really relevant to nearly any solid tumor because, as you said, it's a physics treatment. And so it really shouldn't matter what the type of tumor is as long as we can deliver these treatments into the tumor, injected into the tumor. I think that, we're not going to do liquid tumors. We're not going to chase blood cells around the body with these little alpha DaRT injections. And I assume it might be a little bit harder to do, for example, bone tissue, right? That's a little bit harder. But I'd say the overall majority of cancers and of tumor types, I think would be relevant. Does that make sense from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. And I would even say that given some of the initial data we're seeing out of some of the combination therapies, especially with the checkpoint inhibitor data, really gives me pause and makes me think that perhaps in the future we could also be going after some liquid tumors if we can enable and unlock more of an immune-based effect as well. So I think there's a lot of potential there as well. I think I agree with you initially that really our focus is on traditional solid tumors. And in truth, there are many, many patients that are in need of improvements in their care. And so I think that's a huge market and area for us. But I think, we're constantly thinking about new approaches, new innovations, both on the delivery side as well as on the DART itself, to really be able to address these other areas in the future.
Actually, I've never thought about that. So I'm glad we had this conversation. The idea that even with liquid tumors, if we can find a mass, maybe we can have some synergy there with the immunotherapy. It's a very interesting idea. So thank you. I see here a question as well about our capital strategy and how that supports our go-to-market plans. So we had about $55 million in the bank at the end of Q1. And we announced that we actually received an inbound investment from a pharmaceutical company of about $37 million in April. So pro forma for the end of Q1, almost $90 million. We're feeling very good about our capital position. We have historically spent about $5 million a quarter in terms of net cash burn, give or take. And so we are well funded. We are continuing to expand our plans, as Dr. Den mentioned, a number of US studies coming up, which is very exciting for us. So we are expanding our clinical footprint. We are expanding our manufacturing footprint as well, as I mentioned, as we build out that commercial scale facility in New Hampshire. That said, though, feeling very good about our financial position for the near term, with that roughly 90 million pro forma at the end of Q1, that we can keep running and really execute on a number of these plans and really get some meaningful data and milestones coming out with the funds that we have. So I think we'll pause there. Thank you very much, everybody, for the time. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation. We highly recommend that you follow us on our social media channels, and we look forward to continued conversations in the future. Have a wonderful day.